Welcome to the Bogart Effect, a wealthy wisdom podcast. The following Bogart Effect podcast is intended for general information purposes only. The information discussed is no substitute for personalized investment advice from Bogart or another investment professional. Please see important disclosure information at the end of the presentation. Hello, this is James Bogart, and today I have Jung with me. We're going to be talking about how to find the right financial advisor for you.
Yes.
Thanks for joining today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
This topic is near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely.
Well, and it's one that I think we get asked all the time. You know, what is it that we should be looking for in an advisor? How do you select? I mean, now there's over 18,000 advisory firms, well over 100,000 advisors that are registered with the SEC. How do you know the difference?
Exactly.
So I think the perfect way to start is let's talk about the different types of advisors, because there's lots of them out there, right? So why don't you tell me about some of the different types of advisors?
Well, first of all, when you're looking for an advisor, you absolutely want to do your research and know exactly what the advisors do and how they get compensated. So, you know, whenever we are looking for a professional or looking for a service, we want to know how they're going to get paid, right? So some of the ways that advisors get paid are ones that are fee only. So what does fee only mean to you, James?
Well, fee only is when the only way that they're being compensated is typically either through an investment management fee or a consulting fee, both of which are clearly described, clearly aligned right from the beginning of the relationship. Now, I would compare that to someone who can sell commissionable products. And so someone who can sell commissionable products, they've got their Series 7, Series 6, or Series 66 and 65, but ultimately they're brokers. Now, we will see hybrids of the two where you have those that are fee only in one capacity, but also have their brokerage licenses where they can actually potentially have a conflict. And to me, this conversation comes back to being a fiduciary. Now, a lot of people say, I'm a fiduciary, but I can also still sell you a commissionable product like an insurance policy or an annuity or some type of long-term care program, et cetera. Well, coming back to your point, I think this whole conversation really is about how is someone being paid. And when we talk about being a true fiduciary, you know, what that means to me is that we're ultimately completely aligned in terms of how the compensation is structured. I'm not incentivized to sell you something. Now, that doesn't mean we can't do it, right? I think about how we've built Bogart Wealth. We are fee-only true fiduciary advisors. We get paid for managing assets. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not appropriate for our customers to need, for example, a life insurance policy or a long-term care policy or even an annuity. The way that we've structured it at Bogart Wealth is we have a third-party relationship where if that's something that's appropriate for our clients, we'll bring that third party in, but there is no compensation for it. Now, I've had colleagues in the industry say, well, you're giving up a lot of revenue. Frankly, maybe not, right? But ultimately, it comes down to doing what's best for the client. And I personally think of this whole conversation, if as soon as I understand how someone's getting paid, I understand every incentive that they have. And we're trying to be fully aligned on that, right? So there's fee-only advisors, there's commission advisors, there's RIAs, which I'm going to argue most RIAs are fee-only advisors, right? Now, some get paid for a flat consulting fee, where they just bill the hours of time that they work with. Some align with assets under management. Both of them are fee-only, right? There's nothing wrong with either of them. But then there's robo-advisors. What are those?
So robo-advisors are low-cost automated services. So you pay for, it can be assets under management, or you pay a flat fee, but there's no real person behind this service. It is automated and it's computer generated. So that is what a robo-advisor is. So
when we talk about what's appropriate for your needs, what would you say is probably the best path of a household looking for that?
I would absolutely start off by, what we just talked about. Understand how an advisor gets paid. So you talked about fiduciary, and I think that terminology just gets thrown around way too much these days.
Completely agree.
Almost every firm out there claims that they're a fiduciary, but what does that really mean? And you've done a very good job at explaining that. And I'd like to take that a little bit further.
Let's go.
So we are a registered investment advisor. We are a fiduciary, meaning that, yes, just like you said, we don't sell commission-based products. We don't sell annuities. We don't sell life insurances. All we do, how we make our money is purely assets under management.
Yep.
And we also are subject to very stringent and very strict rules and regulations by the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to report, we have to report a filing every year.
Every quarter.
And every quarter.
Yeah.
I apologize. But that's why you're the CEO, because, you're on top of the all the mandates and rules and regulations.
Well, and it's actually even further than that, right? So it's with the SEC, and then we're also registered with every state that we have more than 5 customers. And Bogart Wealth's been very blessed to grow a lot. I was looking back 6 years ago, we were registered with 5 states, which means that we have more than 5 customers in those states. Now we're registered in 19 states.
Right.
So, clients have just grown.
That's amazing.
Now, with that means that we're subject to a surprise audit from every single one of those states at any point in time, which, of course, there's a regulatory component to that. But it's important to understand, that being an RIA, yes, we're an independent entity,
right,
but that doesn't mean that we're without oversight or guidance.
Yes.
Because one of the misconceptions is I need to go to a big name firm that has offices all over the country, that has, ultimately all the brokerage services and the banking services and whatnot. But understand, it comes back to this conversation alignment. It comes back to how they're being compensated. It comes back to how you're paying for them, things of that sort. And frankly, in a lot of instances, it's not necessarily what's in your best interest. I can speak to my previous life. I was at one of those firms and constantly fraught with conflict. I'll never forget, every month we had to go through and stop the firm from sending out credit card solicitations to our clients because we didn't want to have those types of solicitations go to our customer. And actually, our compensation went down because we weren't allowing the firm to solicit our clients with other products that they offered, right? And so this comes back to the understanding of when you see how someone's being compensated, you understand exactly how there's alignment. And this whole concept of being a true fiduciary, well, why that's so important is because it's allowing us to completely sit on the same side of the table. There is full alignment. No hidden agendas, no proprietary products, nothing that's binding you to the firm. Like I'll tell you, for example, I have an investment product that, ultimately that I invested in because I was doing it for my clients. I left that firm 7 years ago.
Right.
I still have it because it's assets that are proprietary to them. It's locked in there, right? I can't move it. I'm not saying it's a bad investment. That's not what I'm saying. But ultimately, it might not necessarily suit the needs of every client in perpetuity forever. And I like flexibility. I want the ability, if we're not delivering for whatever reason, it's important to be able to move. So when I'm researching an advisor, I want to understand their background. What is the best way of going about doing that?
So when you're looking for the background of an advisor, look up, there's so many things that you can research on the internet for advisors that work for brokerage houses. You can look up brokerage check, and you can simply type in their name and what state they work in, and it will come up with, it will populate any adverse filings against them. It will report whether or not they got let go by another firm. It will report any customer complaints. And you can also look up through the SEC website, you can look up your investment advisor. You can also look up if your planner is a certified financial planner, then you can go to the CFC website, and look it'll report whether or not they're in good standing, whether their license is up to date, and also if they had a bankruptcy in the past 10 years. So I think doing your research and due diligence, and the person that you're going to be potentially working with that are some of the most intimate part of your lives, I think is so crucial.
I'm going to argue the most intimate part of your lives. No, and all great resources. And frankly, just because they have something doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person, right? We're not saying that, but it's understanding that ultimately why are they are where they are.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
I'm biased at Bogart Wealth. Not a single employee of the firm has any type of disciplinary history. And frankly, that's one of the things we hire off of. We've missed a lot of really great human beings as part of our team because they have some history that ultimately we're not allowing within the firm.
Absolutely.
And again, I think it's one point of perspective.
Yes.
It's important to research and understand, especially if you're entering into this trust relationship.
Yes, exactly.
So one I think that I'd like to spend a couple minutes on is what are the designations of financial advisors, right? We were talking a little bit about before we started, right? Like the proverbial alphabet soup of advisors, and you can see all the little designations and acronyms behind their names. But what are they, right? I mean, and I think there's probably 25, 30, 40, 50 of these things now where it's a company that sells some type of designation. What are the ones you need to look for? What are the ones that it really doesn't matter?
Oh my goodness, there are so many designations. Let's see. There's the CHFC.
Yep.
There is the AFA. There is the CLU. And then
CFA, CFP.
Exactly. But when you're looking for the right financial advisor, I think the Certified Financial Planner designation is the gold standard.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the CFP. Right. And again, we're biased, right? We're both CFPs, but I would agree with you, right? If you're looking for a financial advisor that ultimately is going to be able to grow and satisfy all of the needs of a let's just say aging and growing household, right? From education all the way through to retirement and beyond. Certified financial planners are probably the gold standard.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, and again, we're biased, but I would tell you if I'm looking for an advisor for myself or my family, they have to be a CFP.
Yes.
And tangentially, right, I've had a lot of clients ask us, what about the recommendations I make to my kids? They might not have access to CFPs or the ability to afford. Like, to me, I wouldn't want anything less than that, right? So it's one where I think it's important to talk about those designations, what they actually mean, how much impact each of them actually has. I carry, I think at this point, I carry 2 designations. I probably have a couple more that I could keep behind my name, but then it gets to the point there's more letters of designations than my name itself, right? Why? What about CFA, right? And this is one where I think a lot of clients say, well, don't I want a CFA as my advisor? I personally think you want CFAs that are supporting the team that are on your advisors.
Yes.
But not necessarily, not saying that they aren't good advisors, but if I think about the growing needs of a household, certified financial planners are helping with those moving elements, but the CFAs, their core focus and concentration is on the investments.
Yes.
Right. And you need those as part of the investment team for what's available to you, but you don't necessarily need a CFA as your primary point of contact, my personal opinion, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk a little bit about services, right? I think every household has different needs, right? And I think it's important to make sure that as you're interviewing the advisor, you're getting your services and needs met. Talk to me about what types of services an advisory firm should be providing for their clients.
I think it really comes down to what your needs are. So you go through different stages in your life, and you may be searching for an advisor because you want to do some college planning, educational planning. You may have just inherited some money and you want to know what to do with it, or you're planning for retirement. So you start off by researching again, who the advisors are, how they get compensated, and then start interviewing them on what your needs are and how they can best help you. So I personally I have a passion for financial planning. And as a fiduciary, I think that to always act in the best interest of the client, we always have to start with comprehensive planning. So rather, where if your needs are right now, you just want to, see, okay, am I going to have enough saved to pay for my child's education? Okay, well, what about your retirement? Is your retirement needs going to be met? Because we've got to take care of you before you got to take care of your kids' education, right? And, do you have all the proper planning in place? Do you have all the proper insurances in place? Insurance is not necessarily meaning policies, but, do you have the right protection in place to plan for the unexpected, right? And, and aligning that with what your goals and needs are. So going back, regardless of what your needs are, I think having that as a part of a comprehensive conversation is so important.
So I heard you mention financial planning.
Yes.
I heard you mention comprehensive needs-based planning. I'm going to add a few, right?
Yeah,
and so I think coming back to every household being different, their needs are different, the phases of life are different. I think first and foremost, the plan is the epicenter for every household, regardless of what age, stage of life you're in. Because as you mentioned, education planning, insurance needs, long-term care planning, taking care of an elderly parent, those are all things that have not only a financial implication, but also an emotional one. And with having that baseline level plan, it's so important. So and again, I know we're biased, but I would tell you, any advisor that you're looking to hire, our opinion is they need to be doing financial planning.
Exactly.
If they're not doing financial planning, then, frankly, I would just say it's table stakes at this point. You need to. And how do you make a comprehensive recommendation on an investment perspective if you don't know all of the different moving pieces of a portfolio?
Exactly.
Now, beyond that, I think investments are very important. And being able to have an investment solution that is customized to your specific needs. I think of Bogart Wealth. We've got clients from young children all the way up into their 90s. I mean, totally different perspectives, but having an investment solution that's going to be customizable based upon the needs of each of our respective clients. Then I think about, additional services. You talked about insurance, like being able to plan for the insurance needs. I would throw in there estate planning. That's another one. Now, the advisor doesn't necessarily have to prepare the documents, but they need to be able to talk to you about the implications of these things, which again comes back to the plan. I think of tax, right? Tax is a very big part. And then I think about, the ability to talk to you about things like trust services, and all of it at the end of the day really does come back to this comprehensive planning element. But these are things that as we're interviewing an advisor, I think it's important to talk to them about what are the services, what are the expectations. I'm a big proponent in life, it's about value creation. At the end of the day, you create value, and ultimately it will be a platform or conduit for any business relationship to thrive, and regardless of the environment that we're in. But it's one where it's very easy to get sensationalized. I mean, I think about the difference between some of these wirehouses versus an independent firm. It's like, yes, my bank can sell me a CD or they have an investment arm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But coming back to some of the comments that we've had before, are they doing a financial plan for me? How do they know that selling me that CD or that ETF or that mutual fund, whatever it is appropriate for my situation without looking at the baseline level of foundation?
I think you bring up some really, really good points. So, let's say you do find an advisor, right? And you go in there because you want to purchase a home and you want to know whether or not that's a good fit for you in your life. But are they going to help you beyond that? Is that where they stop? And how often are they going to check in with you? What are the services beyond what you need today? So I think, that ongoing conversation, around, okay, now you've purchased a house. How does this fit into your overall plan? And, now you want to start having kids. So let's talk about that. And, so it's a forever evolving situation. And I think it's so important to to find the right person that are going to work with you along those changes.
Well, I'm going to say person and firm, right? It can't be just one person. You need a team to be able to do that. You know, and I think recently we had a conversation at Bogart Wealth internally where our advisory board said, well, you guys are great at retirement. And I'm like, whoa, we do so much more than retirement. Like, what's the value? And the question was, what's the value past retirement? I'm like, well, it's the planning, it's the tax, it's the estate planning, it's the trust work, it's the insurance. And then I think about the intergenerational wealth portion of our mission, right? We're helping your kids, we're helping your parents. Like, it's so much more than just a plan and some investments, right? Like, it's the ongoing integration of those value-oriented activities that really do, in my opinion, create a very successful long-term relationship with any household. So let's talk a little bit about the process of how do you go about finding an advisor within your social circle. So I think about like our client base. We grow 100% by referrals. I mean, every client that's come into the firm has been introduced to us by somebody else that is working with us. I think that's an important thing to talk about. When you start this process, you realize you do need an advisor, you want an advisor. And by the way, usually it's a life event that's triggering the need for an advisor. It might be a marriage, it might be a death, it might be inheritance, it might be retirement. Whatever that life event is, typically that's what ultimately prompts someone thinking, a sale of a business, right? You don't ignore that type of stuff. But that's when you typically want to bring an advisor on board. I personally believe the best thing to do first and foremost is ask your friends, right? Like, who are they working with? And if they can make a recommendation that could be aligned with your needs, right? Like Bogart Wealth, we've built part of our business on being the subject matter experts within companies' benefit programs. So we know those benefit programs extremely well. And yeah, I mean, it ultimately makes it to a point where we know there's value, specifically, we talk about this at the retirement process, but I think there's a heck of a lot more value that we're delivering outside of that. But I mean, the comment that I'm going to make is that you really should look for a referral first before even going to internet searches, right? So the reality of it is that, you know, you can have search engine optimization and search engine marketing campaigns to elevate keywords and things of that sort. And don't get me wrong, Bogart Wealth does that too. But the power of a referral is beyond impactful. And especially if you can get experience shares from the people that you work with, right? Anything else you would say in terms of like how to find an advisor beyond that?
I agree with you 1000%. So when looking for an advisor, you know, asking your friends for referrals, you want to go to who your friends trust, right? Who the circle in your life, who they trust to go to. When I'm looking for someone that where I need to share some very, very private information and know that I'm going to get the best help, I'm going to look to my friends, right? So, you know, it's one of those things where we were just talking about this before we started this podcast, like, you know, doctors, lawyers, financial professionals, they're not really the type of services that you can just Google and find, right? It's by word of mouth. I want to go to who you trust because I know you and I trust you. So I think that is absolutely the right way to go. And it can be daunting. If you just do a Google web search, it can be daunting because everybody's going to say they're fiduciaries these days. And everyone's going to say they act in your best interest. So, you know, how do you find that right person that is really going to meet your needs? And, you know, so I think that's where you start. And if you don't know anybody, then look for rewards, right? Look for those firms that are out there making a name for themselves, that are growing and, you know, and putting their name out there because of all the good and value that they're bringing to the industry.
That's a great point. Yeah, we actually won a client recently because unaffiliated anything we'd ever done, but it was because some of the awards that we had gotten. And they said we chose Bogart Wealth because Bogart Wealth likes to win. I thought that was was cool. Right?
Congratulations on your top 40 under 40.
Thank you. Yeah, no, there's certain ones that have like, I don't want to say more meaning than others, but like that was one that was Very impactful today.
Yes.
And I got a little bit more time left on that
well,
one.
kudos to you. Yeah, you worked hard for it.
So let's talk about let's say now you've got your list, you've got your referrals from your friends, and you got, let's just say 3 or 4 names. How do you ultimately differentiate that list, right? And I think of like our process, how we've built it, how we start introducing the firm. But again, even that, let's say you've got 3 or 4 firms, they all seem great. How do you choose, right? And so I think it's important, every household, they shouldn't just pick the first person they talk to, right? You really should have 2 or 3. A little competitive friction, right? However you want to describe it, but understand, some of the key nuances that are going to be important to you and your family. Like I think of if I'm hiring an advisor for my family, right? Where, professionally, I'm a little biased. I can do it myself. But the advisory firm that I would choose is really in place for my wife and my children, right? And that to me is one of the most critical parts of the needs. We talk about what are my needs, right? I would say for me, I don't necessarily need that. Sure, I would love to have somebody who's going to give me another perspective, another viewpoint. But that doesn't mean that I really want to just turn the keys over, right? Which that's a case for a lot of our clients, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about, how do I get my needs met? How do I answer those questions? What's that interview process look like?
I think it's just by sitting down in front of that person or virtually and having a conversation. Every personality are different, right? We all have different personalities. So, have a conversation. Is it easygoing? Do they fit my personality? Do they seem trustworthy? Do they have the right designations? And also, do they offer the services that I'm looking for? So I think it encompasses all of those things. Just sitting down, having a conversation, and just trusting your gut instinct. Does this person jive with me? Do I get that, that sense where, we're going to be a right fit, or are there red flags?
Yep. Well, and so what would some of those red flags be, right? Let's talk about that. Okay. To me, I would have already researched them. I would have already seen disciplinary, if there is anything. This is where I think of soft skills, right? Like I read any professional we're hiring, I look at how they interview my wife, right? Or they're interacting with my wife. If it's just me, well, frankly, I'm not hiring them for me, right? I'm hiring them for her. So to me, it's just as important how they're communicating with her as they are with me. Or not really my kids at this point, they're too young. But the point is like, this is about the household, right? That's a huge red flag for me. If they're immediately talking about products or something that they can sell me. And again, this is coming back where you start to unravel some of the different elements of the compensation model, right? That's a red flag. Anything else that?
I mean, I perked up a little bit because this is like a part of a passion of mine when it comes to helping clients, right? I want to help them protect against all the bad people out there. So some of the red flags that they should be looking for is, how fast are you ready to move your money? If they're in a hurry to get your assets and they're giving you a timeline, I think that's a big red flag. I think another big red flag that I do not like is fear mongering, right? So if they suddenly start to try to convince you by scaring you, like, what if you died in a car accident tomorrow? What would your wife do? Would your wife be okay? I think trying to get someone on board with fear. I am not a fan of that.
I love that you said that.
At all.
Because there's sales coaches that train people to do things like that. This is why I come back to this value creation conversation, right? Like comes back to, if you're creating value, you don't need to do any of that. You're not selling anything, right?
Exactly.
And you have belief and conviction in what you're doing, and it becomes completely aligned. So, our process, so let's talk a little bit about that, because I believe we don't charge to bring a client through the planning process. And I use that as the opportunity to get to know us and get to know you. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just us trying to win a client's business. It has to be a partnership, both sides.
Exactly.
And if it's not going to be a good fit either way, we should know early on.
Absolutely.
Now, personally, we spend a lot of money and time and energy and resources building out these plans because it gives us that opportunity. And some would describe it as a loss leader, right? But it's one where we're able to demonstrate the value beyond just an initial introductory conversation.
Right.
And with not charging anything, it's one where it's like, well, what's the barrier to do it? There shouldn't be.
Yeah, we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we're a fit on both sides.
And you know, frankly, I think it's, you know, this is how I always frame it for expectations, but it's, look, if we're delivering enough value, please tell your friends about us. Don't keep us a
Absolutely.
secret. And that's the compensation we receive along the way, right? And a referral is worth 1,000 words that we already talked about, right? So being aligned in that regards. So we've talked a lot about what is the right advisor, how to find the right advisor, and I'm sure there's more things.
Oh gosh, I could go on and on and on. Yes.
But I really appreciate the time today.
No, thank you for having me. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The previous podcast was intended for general information purposes only. The information discussed is no substitute for personalized investment advice from Bogart or another investment professional. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk, and it should not be assumed that the future performance of any specific investment, strategy, or service will be profitable, suitable, or successful. Bogart is not a law firm or accounting firm, and no portion of its services should be construed as legal or accounting advice. There is no guarantee a client will experience a certain level of results if Bogart is engaged. Our brochure describing services and fees can be found at www.bogartwealth.com.